Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Courtside View basketball webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune basketball beat writer Steve Walentic. Steve, after Missouri beats Auburn over the weekend, kind of the focus immediately becomes, well, can they now win a road game, which is the thing they haven't done all year. Frank Hayes' point was, I think in the way he was trying to spin it was, well, we haven't played a road game with all of our players yet, or at least not since the UCLA game, so wait and see what we can do when we've got all them. So, your thoughts, is that a legitimate point? I mean, you think this is a team that if they have all their pieces, can go out and do fine on the road?
I think they're a better team with all of their pieces, obviously, so they have a better chance. And I think they have more winnable road games coming up than, playing at Florida or playing at Ole Miss or even at UCLA when they were still without Tony Criswell in that game. So I think it's going to help to have Lawrence Bowers healthier and more in tune with things than he was in his first game back at LSU. But they still have to play better. They still have to take better shots, particularly early in games. They have to not settle. They have to do a lot of things that we haven't seen them do yet.
But they can always explain to you exactly what they should do, but then the next game rolls around and they do not do it.
Right, and they do the exact same thing all over again. And unless we see that change, it's hard to think that, okay, now everybody's back together, everything's fixed. I just don't think that's realistic. I think this team isn't good enough talent-wise that they have all their pieces and they're just going to start mowing people down because they're so talented. I think there's talent, but they still have to play well. And even early in the year, they didn't look like they necessarily fit that well together, and obviously the process of molding a team has slowed down because of all the injuries, but they're going to have to speed that up now that they do have all these pieces back in place and start playing better basketball than they played on the road.
I think Frank Hayes probably reached his tolerance limit for the amount of shots and the quality of shots Phil Pressey was taking at LSU. I don't think he was real happy that Keion Bell wasn't playing at all. His comments that he made about Keion Bell after that game were eerily similar to the comments Gary Pinkel made about James Franklin, where there's nothing structurally wrong with the shoulder. He just said he didn't want to play, those sorts of things, which sort of lets you know he wasn't super happy that Keion Bell didn't give it a go at that LSU game. Because when you look, you lose by 3, and you saw a few days later what he gave. He scores 24 points at home. You can't help but think if he had been playing that LSU game, they probably would have won.
Absolutely, because, Keion's doing two things right now. First of all, he gives them another guy who can drive the ball, and he isn't a guy who settles for three-point shots, and they don't have that many guys who aren't willing to do that on their roster. But he's one who will be aggressive about taking the ball to the basket. He also lately has become at least a serviceable, if not better than that, option as a backup point guard. And when you have Phil Pressey taking questionable shots, questionable times, Hayes would have the opportunity to sit him down if his backup point guard was available. But since he wasn't, Phil ends up playing 39 minutes in that game, takes 21 shots. He scored 25 points, and he was a big reason that they got back in it in the second half. But he also took really the worst shot of the game with about 40 seconds to go when they needed, they have a chance to tie and they need a quality look, and he comes down within 7 seconds, hoists a jumper, and there's a reason that Phil Pressey's finding a lot of open jump shots right now. Right. He's shooting under 20% from three-point range in conference play, and teams want him to take that shot, and he's been much too willing to oblige.
And the other thing Keion Bell gives you is when he's available, then you don't have to play Webster Chan. And, that guy's given him basically nothing since November. The minutes he's on the floor, it's just, he's just a freshman, I understand all that, but he kind of kills him when he's out there. So, he had to play way too many minutes at LSU. So I think that's another big reason why they need Keion Bell in the lineup. And defensively, he seems to be one of the few guys that is kind of committed to playing defense.
Yeah, and he's disruptive at that end of the floor. And Missouri doesn't have that many guys who do that. This is not a team that excels at forcing turnovers. They haven't made it difficult on people to handle the ball. And Keion's he and Phil are the two guys who can put some pressure on the ball and make it uncomfortable for opponents. And Missouri's done an okay job contesting shots this year, and they're pretty good at holding opponents to one shot, but it helps when you can make teams uncomfortable just handling the ball, too. Those are the really great defensive teams, and they don't have that, and Keion's one of the few guys who can provide some of it.
The other oddity they have is that they got two players who basically are fantastic at home and terrible on the road, and one of them, it seems super strange to me, is Alex Orii, who's been in a ton of big games. He's won a national title. He's played in all these arenas. And he just is an individual man in these road games. And then the other being Ernest Ross, who I think is just a streaky shooter. But those two, if they could ever get them to play on the road, that would make a big difference too.
Absolutely. I mean, and Alex, I completely agree. He's the most hard to figure out because you'd think if you've been to the Carrier Dome, on an annual basis, and played against a really good Syracuse team every year and in front of 34,000 people, that you could handle the environment at LSU
or Louisville or Marquette or all those places.
Yeah, and I mean, these road games that they've been to haven't been. The UCLA game was not a really intimidating atmosphere. There were good crowds at Ole Miss and there were good crowds at Florida. There was a half-full building at LSU and a team that doesn't have a lot of size inside to speak of, and that should have been a game where he really excelled, and instead he plays 16 minutes, and they need that to change because he really, when he's playing well, he gives them another dimension, a really good rebounder, really good offensive rebounder, and a guy who has shown since SEC play started that you can throw it to him in the post and he can make things happen. I think Missouri still doesn't throw it to him enough in the post.
True.
But, he's shooting a great percentage in league play. He's been really productive in home games. But they haven't been able to get consistency out of him, and it is surprising given how experienced he is.
Okay, well, tune in next week when we'll discuss that Texas A&M game and a visit from Marshall Henderson and the Ole Miss Rebels.